First step, open up the computer, make sure it's powered off. If it isn't powered off, shut it down properly and allow it to shut down. Once we're sure that it's off and properly shut down, we'll flip it over and remove the battery. Oh, it's locked. Unlock it, remove the battery, set that off to the side, and then I would often recommend just removing the hard drive, since there's no reason for it really to be in there while you're working on it, and it'll just keep it from getting knocked around. So now at this point, we're going to start removing the parts to get to the inside. So the first step is you want to remove the keyboard. So we're going to take out the two screws that are holding the keyboard in. The one nice thing about the Lenovo machines is they use a pretty standard screw size. They really only have 2 or maybe 3 screw sizes. So I've removed the 2 screws from the marked points that have the keyboard icon on them. So we can flip this back over and remove the keyboard. And so you push a little bit on the keyboard and it slides up. And I'm going to use a little tool here to help me get it out. So it slides up just a little bit, and then there's a couple of notched, not really clips, but hooks, and then it comes up, and there's only one connector here, so we're going to remove that one connector, and that works for both the keyboard and the pointer. So we'll set that off to the side. If you were replacing the keyboard, you could just replace it at this point and be done. So next, we're going to remove the palm rest. So now in this case, this machine is actually missing a few screws. So normally you would remove more screws than I'm going to. They're all marked with a little box with some hash marks on it. I'm not really sure what Lenovo is trying to signify with that. But so we're going to remove those. And as I said, most of the screws on the Lenovo are the same size. So we'll take that out. So again, I took out all the screws that have the same mark, and I already took out the 2 keyboard screws. So then we'll flip it back over, and you just lift up on the palm rest, and it comes loose, and it has a single connector as well. You flip up the little holder, and then if you've never opened one of these before, it's a little tricky. You actually flip it up, and you'll hear it kind of click, and then you lift it out. You can just pull the wire out, and so there we have a base. And one of the most common problems we have with the Lenovos is the cracked corners. Let me move this out of the way so you can see it against the white backdrop. You can see there's both the corners on here are broken, so in this case I'm actually going to replace the palm rest. The touchpad is all encased with the replacement of the touchpad, so you don't need to remove that at this point. Once the palm rest is removed, we can begin the process of disconnecting the screen module from the base module. The first step is to disconnect and unroute all the wires. So the red and blue wires in our particular model aren't used because they're used either for cellular or Bluetooth, which we don't have installed in our particular SKUs. And then the gray and black wires go to the Wi-Fi module. So I'm going to use a little prying tool to pop the 2 connectors off the Wi-Fi card. And so now we have the 4 wires. There'll be a picture attached to show up close these wires because they're a little tricky to rewire back down in. You may want to take a picture before you undo them just so you have some idea how they went. The one trick is you can't unwind them all the way at once. You have to kind of unwind them each notch at a time. So you take out all 4 of that one, then all 4 from that one, then all 4 from this one, and then all 4 out of that, the next loop, and then all 4 out of this one, and then the final loop here. So we've now pulled those 4 wires out of there, and now we have to oops, there seems to be an extra piece of plastic floating around here. We'll get rid of that. Now we have to begin removing some of the screws because we have to remove another plastic shield before we can move on to the next step. So now we're going to remove 3 screws from the next plastic shield. The trickiest screw that causes, personally, me the most problems is always this screw right here. It is actually underneath the wires, so you have to be careful to remember to put it back in before you put the wires back down, or you'll have to take the wires all back out again. So I'm going to remove that screw. Now you'll notice these screws are one of the other style, so there's the silver ones and the black ones, and so those are 2 of the different sizes of screws inside the Lenovo. So I'm going to remove the other 2 screws here, and these 2 screws are not really covered by anything. Now that we've removed those 3 screws, we actually need to go back on the underside one more time and remove some more screws. So I'm going to close the lid back up here, flip this back over. So now we need to remove basically all the screws on the bottom that aren't marked as something else. They all are in this area up here, and they hold the other plastic shield on. So there are 5 screws here on the bottom that you need to remove. The first one that's kind of the farthest away is this one down here. And then there's 4 across the top here. And then these last 2 are actually 2 of the different screws inside the case. And this is another good reason to remove the battery, because if you don't remove the battery, you can't get to those 2 screws. So now we will flip it back over, and we should be able to pull this plastic shield up. And you actually have to spin the screen and give it a little tug. So then it just kind of pops loose, and you can work it out underneath the screen, and you just have to be careful to leave these wires up on top as you're pulling it out and the other wires down below. So I'll slide this out, and you'll see these wires kind of stay inside it and fall down, and then I can remove this part here. That's stuck on. Alright. So that's the other plastic shield that goes over the back side of the screen. So we'll remove that. Now at this point, you have access to remove the entire system board if you want to. In this case, I'm not going to, because I don't need to replace it for this, but if you were going to replace the entire base, you could do that at this point. And what you would do is take out the 4 screws that are on either side of the screen, and then the whole screen piece can lift off completely. There's two other cables here that you remove before you can do that, but you would do that, and then you can completely remove the system board and replace the base if you want to, or replace any other part. In this case, I'm actually just going to replace the power plug here, and it looks like I may actually have to take this out to get to that because it is on the underside of the system board. So we actually will remove the entire system board. So let me remove screws here. And so these are actually a fourth type of screw that are used inside the Lenovo. But the nice thing is they're used in very specific locations, so it's not like they alternate them back and forth as you work around. So that's two, and then I will remove the other two. Flip out connectors here. And so at this point, we've totally separated the screen module and all of its cables from the base module. So I'm going to set this off to the side. One of the trickier pieces to getting out the system board is actually the VGA connector, because you have to unscrew the VGA screws, I guess, nuts / screws. So we actually got a tool that's a 5mm or 5.5mm, I can't remember which, that will get in there and help us get those out. So I will use that to extract these two screws. Because these screws are actually holding the system board into the base. So I'll remove that one. So you take out the two screws that are underneath or inside the express card slot, and they are actually the same size as the silver screws that we used that was holding down the plastic shield. And I'm going to use my handy dandy nose pliers to get these screws out of here. There we are. So you need to remove the screw from the Wi-Fi card because while it's one, holding the Wi-Fi card in place, two, it's holding the system board down. There's one other additional screw over here in the center of the system board. Also. There we are. So once we get all the screws out, the whole assembly lifts out. In this case, I need to replace the AC adapter because it's been damaged, so I'm going to disconnect this cable. And then we're going to undo the screw holding the metal shield in place. And I have a replacement over here. While I got this open, I'm going to bend this back a little bit because it was also bent out of shape. And then we'll put the screw back in and it should hold this nicely in place. So now I've replaced the AC input adapter and we're going to put the system board back in the machine. So I need to reconnect that AC plug. Okay, so we'll plug that back in, and I guess it's actually easier to do it from this side. We should be able to put the system board back in place. As you're putting it in, you want to slide the audio jack into the appropriate hole, and then you should be able to just settle down everything where it goes. So now we've got the system board back in the case, and we should be good to go to put all the screws back in. So we're going to put back. Oh, there was one other thing I forgot to mention as I was taking this apart. You have to be careful as you take this apart. There's the pen catch trigger that tells the machine that the pen is in the pen garage, and then that tells it not to read it as part of the touch screen. So there's a screw that goes into the little housing that holds that in place. Because if you just pull, it will come apart and then break. So the first thing we're going to do is put the 4 screws back in that we had to take out to remove it. So we'll start with the one screw up by the fan. Put that one back in. We're going to put the 2 screws in that are inside the express card slot. And then we're going to put the 1 screw in that holds the Wi-Fi card as well as the system board back in place. So now we've put all the screws back in to the system board. Now we're going to put the screen back on. So bring the screen back into place. And reattach it with the 4 screws that hold it in place. now we have the screen reattached. And the one thing to not forget as you're putting these back together is the screws that go into the VGA connector. So we'll put those in now. And you can take these out with like a needle nose pliers, but it's much more challenging to do so. Okay, and now before we put the plastic shield back in place, we need to reattach the two ribbon connectors here in the center of the system board coming down from the screen assembly. So we'll lock those two back into place. Gotta make sure they're seated just right, and they'll lock down in. So those are locked back into place. And so now we're going to put the first plastic shield, or the plastic shield, back in. And the trick when you're putting this in is you got to make sure to feed the 4 color wires through the shield and then put it back down into place. And again, if you rotate the screen, it will make it easier to slide this into place. And so we get that down, and it kind of clicks into place. And it's okay if you don't get it perfectly clicked down on all sides, because as you screw it down, it will click down more. And it doesn't have a whole lot of give to the clicks as you get it down on. So we've got that back in place now. And now comes probably the most time-consuming and annoying part, which is rerouting these 4 wires back through all these grooves. And just like when we took them out, you have to route them through each corner one at a time. And this is where it's handy to have that picture that you took earlier of the routing of them, so you can see exactly how they came out, so you can replicate that going back in. To assist me with routing this off camera, I actually have the picture up that I took earlier of the routing of these wires, so that will assist me. So the first corner here, it doesn't really matter how you lay them in there because they're going to move a little bit. So underneath this first gray hook here, and I'm going to zoom this in a little bit more so that you can see, hopefully, a little bit better. So I'm going to start with my gray wire here, and then going to do the purplish blue wire, and then my red wire and my black wire. So that gets me through the first corner. And now our first notch, and now I'm going to go over here and move on to my next notch, and I'm going to kind of reverse the order. So I'm going to start with the black cable, oh, I almost forgot. As I said earlier, don't forget to put this screw in before you run the wires, because otherwise you got to take the wires back out. So I'm going to stop right now, put that screw in. Okay, so let's continue here. So as I said, I'm going to go in reverse order here. I'm going to put the black wire in first, and if you don't put them in kind of the right order, it gets harder and harder as you go. So So I did black, red, purple, gray, and then we go through the next corner. This corner you can't quite fit them all underneath the notch, so you don't have to, you just kind of keep them all in the same order. And now we're going to do this the same order here. We're going to start with black, red, purple, and gray. And the color, you know, the exact order of the colors don't matter. It's more the rotating back and forth as you go through. So let me tilt the pick camera down just a little bit so you can see the next stage. So now I'm going to go down and do gray, purple, red, black, and then we're going to reverse the order again one more time and do black, red, purple, and gray. So now we've got all the wires back to where we need them. And now we're going to hook everything back up. And again, we don't hook the red and blue in this particular model back up to the same spot because they're not used. And so according to my picture, the black goes here. On the, I guess, closest to the screen. And then the gray wire goes here on the bottom part of the screen. So then we put tuck all the wires in underneath the system board and anything else you can fit them underneath there so they're out of the way. Now we're going to put the other two screws down that hold the plastic shield on. Okay, so we've basically got the plastic shield back attached from the inside. Now we're going to close the lid, and let me zoom back out a little bit. I'm going to flip this over, and we're going to put our screws back in that hold that plastic shield in place. So we take our two unique screws that are a little bit smaller black screws and put them in first. And we take our other screw here. And then we're going to take two of the standard black screws and reattach them. And as these go in, they'll kind of pull that plastic shield firmly into place. And we got the one really distant one down here. So that's all we can do with the base now. So now we're going to flip it back over again. We're going to attach the palm rest, and I actually happen to have a new palm rest here. So I've got a brand new palm rest here. So we're going to put this on, and when you put it on, you just kind of hook it on the bottom edge and then snap it down into place. So there's kind of grooves along this edge here that you hook it into and then snap it down. So we hooked it into those grooves and then click it down into place. And then we're going to reattach the touchpad connector cable. So we flip up the connector and insert it down in there. So once you have it in place, snap that down, and then we will flip the machine back over again, and we're going to screw down the palm rest. And as I mentioned, on this particular machine we're missing a few screws, so I'm just going to screw the two middle ones on here, which will hold it the most in place. Now that we've finished attaching the palm rest, we will insert the keyboard back in. So we just kind of reverse the process here. We're going to plug in the cable. And then we slide it back down, kind of lock it into place. All the little grooves should fit in. And we'll flip it back over and put our last two screws in. And then we'll finish putting the rest of it back in. So we're going to put the hard drive back in. Hard drive door back on. And reattach our battery. And there we have a complete repair of the palm rest and the power input jack.